An entire civilization has been sleeping beneath the Amazon rainforest for centuries. This is not a legend, but a reality now being pulled from the shadows, and it forces us to rewrite the history of the Americas. For generations, experts believed this jungle was a pristine wilderness, a place where only small, nomadic tribes could survive. That story is wrong. By the end of this, you will see concrete proof of vast cities and sophisticated societies that once thrived where we saw only empty green. How could such a complex world vanish without a trace? And what can its rediscovery teach us about our own future? We are about to see how laser technology is revealing geometric earthworks and urban networks hidden for centuries. What does it mean when a jungle you thought was wild has actually been a garden for thousands of years? This long-held belief was not born from malice, but from a fundamental misunderstanding of the landscape. For centuries, explorers from Europe arrived and saw an impenetrable wall of green. They encountered small, mobile groups and concluded that this was all the jungle could ever support. The soil, they noted, was surprisingly thin and nutrient-poor, washed clean by relentless rains. To their eyes, this was a counterfeit paradise, a place that looked lush but could never feed a city. This view became an academic consensus, championed by influential figures who argued the Amazon was a place where complex societies simply could not take root. The idea was seductive in its simplicity, framing the rainforest as the ultimate pristine wilderness, a world untouched by human hands since time began. It fit a comforting narrative of nature in perfect balance, undisturbed. But what if that narrative was blinding us to the truth? The real story of the Amazon is not one of human absence, but of profound human adaptation. The key lies in looking at the land not through the eyes of an outsider expecting familiar fields, but through the eyes of those who called it home. They did not see poor soil, they saw potential. They did not fight the forest, they learned to work with it on a scale we are only beginning to comprehend. This intellectual shift is monumental, moving the Amazon from the periphery of human history to its very center, revealing that the greatest civilizations were not those that conquered nature, but those that learned to converse with it. The first tangible evidence of this lost world emerged not from deep excavation, but from the stark view of a clearing sky. In the Brazilian state of Acre, as tracts of rainforest were cleared for cattle ranching in the 1970s, pilots and workers began noticing strange shapes in the exposed earth. From the ground, they were mere subtle ridges and ditches, easy to dismiss. But from the air, the truth was undeniable. Perfect geometric forms had been etched into the very skin of the continent. Enormous circles, precise squares, and complex octagons, some over 300 meters across, lay hidden beneath the canopy. They were not built of stone, but sculpted from the earth itself, with trenches dug deep and the soil piled into banks. These are the Acre geoglyphs, and they number not in dozens but in the hundreds. Their discovery sent a shockwave through archaeology. Here was a signature of civilization that required a complete rethinking of Amazonian history. Creating just one of these earthworks would have demanded a coordinated, large-scale effort. It means a society with planners who understood geometry, leaders who could organize labor, and a community united by a shared purpose. Researchers like Denise Sean have studied these sites extensively, suggesting they served as ceremonial centers, spaces for astronomical observation, or perhaps fortified gathering places. They were not dwellings but places of meaning. This transforms our understanding of the people who built them. They were not merely reacting to their environment, they were imposing grand, symbolic order upon it. They were converting the land into a canvas for their beliefs and social structure. Think of the effort the communal will require to dig these massive patterns by hand with simple tools in the humid Amazonian heat. This was not the work of a few families. It was the statement of a culture confident enough to invest immense energy into something beyond mere survival. These geoglyphs are a silent language written across the landscape, the first decipherable sentence in a story we had long assumed was never written. They prove that the ancient Amazon was not a blank page, but a carefully inscribed manuscript, its most profound chapters waiting just beneath the surface. But the geoglyphs were only the beginning, a signature on the landscape that hinted at a much larger text. The true revelation came when researchers asked a more fundamental question: how did these people eat? How could a civilization capable of such monumental earthworks sustain itself on soil that science had declared infertile? The answer was not just in the structures they built, but in the very ground they walked upon, a discovery as transformative as the cities themselves. Scattered across the Amazon basin, often near ancient settlement sites, are islands of incredibly rich, dark soil known as Terra Preta, or Amazonian dark earth. This is not a natural phenomenon. It is a human invention, a technological masterpiece crafted over generations. While the surrounding rainforest soil is typically thin and acidic, washed clean of nutrients, Terra Preta is deep, dark, and teeming with life. Scientific analysis reveals its secret recipe: a deliberate mixture of charcoal from controlled burns, broken pottery, food waste, compost, and manure. This was not accidental. It was a sophisticated form of soil engineering. Pioneering researcher Wim Sombroek helped the world understand that these patches were not just fertile, they were permanent. Unlike the slash-and-burn agriculture we associate with the tropics, which depletes a plot in a few years, Terra Preta gardens could be cultivated continuously for centuries, perhaps even millennia. They are a self-renewing resource, with the embedded charcoal acting like a sponge, holding nutrients and moisture, and creating a perfect environment for beneficial microbes. This changes everything. It means these societies were not just passing through the jungle, they were putting down deep, permanent roots. They were not just harvesting what the forest offered, they were actively cultivating it, transforming their environment into a vast, productive garden. This leads to the second key discovery, the concept of the garden city. Archaeologists, by connecting the dots between Terra Preta patches, geoglyphs, and other features, now see networks of settlements. These were not dense, stone-built metropolises like those in Mesoamerica or the Andes. Instead, they were clusters of towns and villages, connected by straight, raised causeways that cut through the forest, all set within a managed landscape. Imagine a city not of crowded streets, but of orchard neighborhoods. The forest around them was not wild, it was curated, a carefully designed agroforestry system. They would have cultivated groves of fruit and nut trees like Brazil nut and cocoa, patches of staple crops like manioc and squash, and medicinal plants, all growing together in a layered, sustainable system that mimicked the forest's own structure. This was a civilization built on a profound understanding of ecology. They fed thousands not by conquering the jungle, but by becoming its most skilled gardeners. The legacy of these ancient agronomists is still with us, quite literally beneath our feet. That rich, dark earth is their enduring signature, a testament to a society that did not take from the land, but gave back to it, building a foundation so fertile it has lasted for over 1,000 years. What does it mean when the most lasting monument of a civilization is not a pyramid, but the soil itself? The soil tells one story, but to see the full city, you need a different kind of vision. The single most transformative tool in this archaeological revolution is a technology called light detection and ranging, or Lidar. Imagine a special camera that does not take pictures of light, but instead measures distance with lasers. Mounted on airplanes or drones, it fires millions of invisible laser pulses every second down through the dense jungle canopy. Most of these pulses bounce off leaves and branches, but a precious few slip through the gaps, strike the ground, and bounce back. By timing their return with incredible accuracy, a computer can build a perfect three-dimensional map of the forest floor, digitally stripping away every single tree and vine. What remains is a ghostly, breathtaking image of the ancient ground exactly as it was shaped by human hands. It is like having X-ray vision for an entire landscape. This technology has turned a century of slow, difficult ground exploration into a sudden, panoramic revelation. In the Bolivian Amazon, a Lidar survey led by archaeologist Heiko Prumas scanned a vast area thought to be mostly empty. The results were staggering. The digital map revealed the clear outlines of an entire urban civilization belonging to what is called the Casarabe culture. The scans showed not just one or two sites, but a complex network of settlements connected by straight, raised causeways that ran for miles. At the center were monumental platforms and pyramids, some over 20 meters tall, surrounded by concentric rings of moats and ramparts. These were not random villages, they were carefully planned urban centers, laid out with clear purpose and social organization. Prumas describes this as a form of low-density urbanism, a unique kind of city perfectly adapted to the tropics. Instead of cramming people into tight stone apartments, these cities spread out, integrating neighborhoods with cultivated land, reservoirs, and ceremonial spaces. The LiDAR images show causeways radiating out from the core like spokes on a wheel, linking the main plaza to outlying towns and resource areas. This reveals a level of regional planning and political cohesion that was simply unimaginable before the lasers revealed it. Every new LiDAR survey expands the map of this lost world, revealing more sites, more connections, more complexity. It suggests we are not looking at isolated kingdoms, but at a vast, interconnected network of societies that may have spanned much of the southern Amazon. This technology allows us to map a civilization without disturbing a single leaf, offering a non-invasive window into a past we once thought was lost forever. With each new scan, the scale of what was here grows, pushing the boundaries of what we thought was possible in the ancient world. The jungle, it turns out, was not hiding emptiness, it was guarding the blueprints of forgotten cities. The legend of a golden city hidden in the jungle has lured explorers to their doom for centuries. Perhaps the most famous was the British surveyor Percy Fawcett, who in 1925 led an expedition into the Brazilian wilderness seeking a lost metropolis he called simply Z. He and his party vanished without a trace, their fate becoming one of exploration's greatest mysteries and cementing the myth of El Dorado as a dangerous fantasy. Yet, what if the stories that drew Fawcett to his end were not pure fiction, but a distorted echo of a real and profound truth? Modern archaeology suggests that is exactly the case. In the upper Xingu region, a place not far from where Fawcett was last seen, researcher Michael Heckenberger has worked alongside indigenous Kuhikugu people to uncover something astonishing. They have mapped not a single golden city, but an entire network of them. This is the story of Kuhikugu. What Heckenberger and his team found were clusters of large, fortified villages dating from roughly 1250 to 1650 AD. These were no simple hamlets. Each settlement was encircled by deep moats and sturdy wooden palisades, with central plazas, carefully aligned roads, and complex bridges spanning the rivers. Wide, straight causeways connected these towns across the forest, some running for over 30 miles, integrating a regional landscape that supported many thousands of people. The engineering was precise and purposeful, a testament to a society that managed its environment and its security with great skill. This discovery does something remarkable. It bridges the romantic, tragic quest of figures like Fawcett with the clear-eyed evidence of science. Fawcett was searching for a solitary, stone-built city of treasure, a place of singular grandeur. What actually existed was something different, and in many ways more historically significant, a distributed civilization of garden cities. The truth behind the legend of Z was not a hoard of gold, but a wealth of social organization, ecological knowledge, and community planning. The real treasure was their way of life, a sustainable and interconnected existence that flourished for centuries within the embrace of the forest. This case study shows us that the most captivating mysteries are not always solved by finding exactly what the old stories describe, but by discovering the reality that inspired them, a reality often more complex and human than the myth. The absence of stone pyramids was not a sign of simplicity, but a profound adaptation to the world they inhabited. In the relentless humidity of the Amazon, stone would have been a burden to transport and offered little advantage. Instead, the master builders of the rainforest worked with the materials the forest provided in abundance: wood, palm thatch, and the earth itself. This choice, however, created the ultimate historical vanishing act. Organic architecture decays, leaving behind only subtle ghosts in the soil, whispers of post holes and compacted floors where great longhouses once stood. This perishable nature is the primary reason these vast civilizations remained invisible for centuries, their greatest achievements returning to the earth from which they came. Yet, to mistake this for a lack of sophistication is to miss the genius of their engineering entirely. Their monuments were not built for eternity in stone, but for harmony with a living, breathing landscape. Nowhere is this collaborative genius clearer than in the seasonally flooded regions, like the Llanos de Mojos in Bolivia. Here, the architects faced an annual challenge: vast plains that would transform into shallow inland seas for months at a time. Their solution was to literally raise their world above the water. They constructed enormous artificial mounds, some spanning hundreds of meters and rising several stories high. These were not mere piles of dirt, but carefully engineered platforms, built up layer by layer with refuse, soil, and clay to create stable, well-drained foundations. On these artificial islands, they built their homes, their temples, and their communal plazas, creating permanent settlements in a landscape that was ephemeral for half the year. It was a breathtaking act of terraforming, turning a challenging environment into a secure homeland. But they did not stop at simply staying dry. They reshaped the very hydrology of their world. Archaeologists have mapped extensive networks of causeways, raised earthen roads that connected these mound settlements across miles of wetlands, running alongside them, and sometimes cutting across the landscape in straight lines were intricate canals. This was a comprehensive transportation grid, allowing canoe travel even in the dry season. Yet these canals served a dual purpose. They were also sophisticated aquaculture systems. By managing water flow, these ancient engineers created ideal environments for fish, effectively farming protein on a massive scale within their own infrastructure. This reveals a mindset of profound integration. They were not just building shelters, they were designing entire ecosystems that provided food, transport, and security in one interconnected system. This architecture of adaptation speaks to a deep, intimate conversation with the Amazon's rhythms. They did not seek to conquer the flood, they learned to ride its cycle. They did not clear the forest to impose an alien order, they curated it to enhance its bounty. Their buildings, though now returned to the soil, represented a pinnacle of sustainable design, a lesson in resilience written not in enduring stone, but in the intelligent shaping of a living world. The true monument they left behind is the very idea that a civilization can flourish not by dominating nature, but by learning its language and building in concert with it. Such a vast and engineered landscape could not have been sustained by a scattered few. The sheer scale of the earthworks, the miles of causeways, and the countless Terra Preta gardens point to a society of immense scale and social intricacy. Archaeologists like Anna Roosevelt have analyzed the evidence and proposed a staggering revision. that certain regions of the Amazon may have supported populations in the millions before European contact. To put that in perspective, it means the Amazon basin was not a sparsely populated wilderness, but a demographic heartland, potentially rivaling the population densities of many contemporary European societies at the time. This single shift in perspective changes everything. A population of that magnitude does not organize itself by chance. It requires systems, structure, and a shared vision. The evidence for this sophisticated social fabric is etched into the landscape and buried in the soil. Across wide regions, archaeologists find remarkably standardized styles of pottery and artwork. This is not the pattern of isolated villages making whatever they please. It suggests a shared cultural identity, perhaps even a form of political unity that encouraged common artistic traditions over hundreds of miles. Furthermore, the presence of exotic materials in these sites tells a story of connection. Items like polished jade from the Andes or vibrant feathers from distant parts of the forest did not walk into these cities on their own. Their presence indicates established long-distance trade networks, managed by people who understood value, exchange, and diplomacy. But the most compelling proof of complex organization is written in the earth itself. Consider the labor required to dig a single geoglyph, a perfect circle 300 meters wide, or to raise an entire town on an artificial mound. These were not weekend projects. They represent the coordinated effort of thousands of people working under a shared plan, likely directed by a managerial class with the authority to command such effort for communal goals. This points to a society with clear social stratification, not just a simple hierarchy of a chief and followers, but a layered polity with elites who planned, artisans who crafted, engineers who designed, and laborers who built. The political structure that managed these garden cities was likely a unique adaptation to the Amazonian environment, a form of governance built on managing abundance and interconnection rather than simply controlling territory. It was a civilization that understood its strength lay in its unity and its deep, symbiotic relationship with the forest. This transforms the historical narrative from a tale of small, isolated tribes simply surviving the jungle to one of vast, interconnected polities actively and intelligently cultivating their world. They were not subjects of the rainforest, they were its partners, and that partnership required a social contract of remarkable complexity. The true lost city was never a place of gold, but a network of mines, a civilization woven into the very roots of the trees. This partnership between people and the forest left a living legacy we can still walk through today. The idea of the Amazon as a pristine, untouched wilderness, a virgin forest, is a powerful myth, but the evidence now tells a very different story. It reveals that much of what we consider ancient, natural jungle is in fact a cultural landscape, a garden on a continental scale shaped by human intention over thousands of years. The proof is in the trees themselves. In regions that were once home to these ancient settlements, botanists and ecologists have noticed a curious pattern. The forest composition is subtly, yet significantly, different. There is a noticeably higher concentration of species that are useful to humans. Towering Brazil nut trees, which are notoriously difficult to cultivate, often stand in groves near archaeological sites. Palms that provide oil, fruit, and thatching materials appear in greater numbers. Vines used for rope and medicinal plants cluster in certain areas. This is not a random act of nature. It is the signature of a practice called forest gardening or agroforestry. These ancient societies did not simply clear land for fields, they actively curated the forest. They would selectively plant, protect, and nurture the species that fed, housed, and healed them, creating a layered, productive ecosystem that mimicked the natural forest while directly serving their needs. Leading researcher Charles Clement calls this the domestication of the landscape. It was a form of cultivation so subtle and integrated that, to an untrained eye, it simply looks like wild jungle, but it represents a profound level of environmental management. They were not just living in the Amazon, they were tending it, enhancing its biodiversity in ways that have endured long after the gardeners themselves vanished. This turns our entire understanding of conservation on its head. The incredible richness and resilience of the Amazon rainforest, which we have long celebrated as a monument to untouched nature, may in fact be a monument to ancient human stewardship. The forest's abundance is partly a heritage, a gift from societies that saw themselves not as separate from nature, but as active participants in its cycle. This reframes a vital modern debate. It suggests that the greatest hope for preserving these ecosystems might not lie in isolating them from people, but in relearning the kind of symbiotic partnership these ancient cultures mastered. The Amazon, then, is not a museum of wilderness, but a living archive of a forgotten collaboration, and its continued survival may depend on us understanding that deep, green history. To truly know a people, look at what they grew in their gardens. The story of this lost civilization is written not only in their earthworks, but in the very seeds and bones they left behind. At ancient sites along rivers like the Tortonio waterfall in Brazil, scientists sifting through the soil uncover a rich botanical record. This is the field of archaeobotany, where tiny, charred fragments of seeds and pollen tell a grand story of sustenance. The staples of their diet were a sophisticated mix. They cultivated manioc, also known as cassava, a versatile root that could be processed into flour or fermented. They grew maize, squash, beans, and peanuts, a nutritional powerhouse combination that provided carbohydrates, protein, and essential fats. This was not a subsistence diet, it was a balanced, intentional cuisine. But their true genius lay above the ground. Beyond their annual fields, they managed something far more enduring: vast orchards of perennial tree crops. They created what researchers now call food forests. Imagine walking through a section of jungle that feels completely natural, yet every tree has a purpose. Towering Brazil nut trees, which are almost impossible to deliberately plant, stand in groves because these ancient gardeners protected and favored them. Fruit trees like cocoa, acai palms, and peach palms would have provided year-round harvests. This was a form of agroforestry, a layered garden where food grew at every level, from the canopy down to the forest floor, mimicking the natural ecosystem while directly serving human needs. It was a living, breathing pantry that required no plowing and regenerated itself. Their culinary world extended to the water. These were river civilizations, and they engineered their waterways as skillfully as their land. They built sophisticated fish weirs, which are like underwater fences made of wood or stone, to channel and trap fish during seasonal migrations. In some areas, they even constructed ponds and managed canals for aquaculture, essentially farming fish within their own engineered landscape. This provided a reliable, abundant source of protein without depleting wild stocks. All of this agricultural intensity was made possible by that foundational invention, the Terra Preta soils. The rich, dark earth was not just a happy accident. It was the direct result of this deep food culture. Kitchen waste, broken pottery, charcoal from cooking fires, and compostable materials were continually added to the soil, creating a self-renewing fertility that could support orchards and gardens for centuries. This turns the entire system into a beautiful cycle. The food they ate directly nourished the land that would grow their next meal. This was the opposite of monoculture. It was a polyculture system of breathtaking complexity and resilience. If a pest attacked one crop, dozens of others thrived. If a drought came, the deep roots of the trees reached water. This model provided not just calories, but nutritional security and long-term stability. The foodways of these ancient Amazonians reveal the core of their philosophy: a profound agroecological knowledge that viewed the rainforest not as a warehouse to raid, but as a partner to cultivate. They built a civilization on a foundation of perennial abundance, a lesson in sustainability written in the language of seeds, soil, and flowing water. These geometric earthworks were far more than just impressive landscaping. To understand their true purpose, we must listen to what the land itself is telling us. The perfect circles and precise squares carved into the Amazonian soil were not random, they were a language. Most researchers now see them as profound ceremonial centers, spaces where the physical and spiritual worlds met. Their alignments are often deliberate, with certain avenues and openings oriented toward the solstice sun or significant stars. This suggests a deep cosmological awareness, a way of anchoring their community's place within the cycles of the heavens. Anthropologist Clark Erickson offers a compelling comparison, noting that while Peru's famous Nazca lines are best seen from the air and seem removed from daily life, the Amazonian geoglyphs were integrated into a lived-in landscape. People inhabited the areas around them, making these enclosures active, central places in their social and spiritual geography. Imagine the scene during a major gathering. The community would converge within these vast, defined spaces, the earthen banks creating a boundary between the ordinary world and a place of ritual. Special hearths found at some sites show evidence of large-scale feasting. Elaborate pottery, likely used for holding ceremonial drinks or offerings, has been recovered. These were not silent, empty monuments. They were vibrant stages for storytelling, for rites of passage, for honoring ancestors, and for reinforcing the bonds that held society together. Through shared ritual practice within these geometric frames, community identity was forged and reaffirmed. The act of building them itself was likely a sacred endeavor, a communal project that physically manifested a shared belief system. This transforms our understanding of the landscape entirely. The earth was not just a resource to be cultivated for food, it was a canvas for communicating with the spiritual realm. By shaping it into perfect forms, the builders were imposing a sacred geometry upon the world, creating order out of the wildness of the forest. It represents a worldview where human beings, the cosmos, and the earth were seen as deeply interconnected. The geoglyph was a point of connection, a place where myth became tangible, where social order was mirrored in the geometric order of the land. To stand inside one of these enclosures was to stand within a model of their universe. So while we may never know the exact chants or the names of the spirits they honored, these earthworks give us a powerful window into their mindset. They reveal a people who sought meaning in the stars above and expressed that meaning in the soil beneath their feet, crafting a spiritual legacy as enduring as the very shapes they left behind. The geometric enclosures were centers of life, but the world they anchored would soon face an unimaginable storm. A pivotal question arises: if these societies were so widespread and complex, why did they collapse and fade from memory, leaving only whispers in the soil? The answer lies not in a failure of their brilliant adaptation, but in a cataclysm that arrived from across the ocean. The prevailing theory points to the catastrophic arrival of Europeans in the 16th century. While direct military conquest in the dense Amazon was slower and more difficult than the swift campaigns in the Andes or Mexico, an invisible, far more devastating force raced ahead of the explorers themselves. Old-world pathogens like smallpox, influenza, and measles swept into populations that had no prior exposure and thus no immunological defense. These illnesses spread like wildfire along the very trade routes and river networks that connected the garden cities. The result was a demographic collapse of a scale that is difficult to comprehend, with some estimates suggesting losses of 90% or more of the population within a few generations. Imagine the social fabric of these interconnected polities unraveling almost overnight. The knowledge holders, the engineers who maintained the canals, the elders who knew the rituals for the geoglyphs, the gardeners who tended the food forests were lost. With such a staggering loss of life, the intricate systems that sustained the civilization began to fail. The managed landscapes requiring constant, knowledgeable care were abandoned. The large-scale communal projects, like maintaining earthworks or digging new canals, became impossible. The social networks that coordinated trade and governance fragmented into smaller, isolated groups focused solely on survival. In a matter of decades, the forest which they had so carefully curated began its relentless reclamation. Vines climbed over abandoned mound platforms, seedlings took root in the plazas, and the great causeways were swallowed by undergrowth. The cities of wood and earth returned to the soil, leaving only the most durable signatures, the deep geoglyphs and the patches of dark earth, as silent witnesses. This was not a failure of their environmental philosophy, it was a historical tragedy of hemispheric scale. The collapse was so total and so swift that it created a vacuum of memory, allowing the later myth of an empty, pristine wilderness to take root and flourish for centuries. The jungle did not hide a secret because it wanted to. It grew over a graveyard of a world undone by a storm it never saw coming. The silence left by collapse was never truly empty. In the absence of written records, the story of this lost world did not vanish. It transformed, finding refuge in the most resilient of vessels, human memory. Across the Amazon today, indigenous communities carry forward narratives that resonate with the archaeological discoveries now being made. They speak of a time when people were more numerous, of great ancestral leaders, and of places in the forest that hold special power, stories that have been passed down through countless generations. This is not coincidence but cultural continuity. The sophisticated ecological knowledge possessed by these communities is a living library, a direct inheritance from those deep-time societies. An elder identifying a specific vine as the strongest for binding, or knowing which tree's bark yields a medicine for fever, is not just recalling a practical fact. They are accessing an ancient database of survival and symbiosis, refined over millennia. Anthropologists like William Ballet have worked closely with indigenous partners to document this profound ethnobotanical wisdom, recognizing that the forest itself is a historical text, and its traditional stewards are the most fluent readers. For instance, the groves of Brazil nut trees that cluster around ancient sites are often protected and harvested by local communities today, a practice that likely stretches back to the very gardeners who first cultivated them. This living knowledge provides an indispensable key for interpreting the silent archaeological record. When researchers find certain seeds or pollen at a site, indigenous collaborators can explain how those plants were used, whether for food, construction, or ritual, breathing life into the dusty fragments. This partnership reveals a crucial truth. Contemporary indigenous cultures are not primitive holdovers from a simpler time. They are the dynamic descendants and active custodians of an immensely rich history. Their oral traditions, land management practices, and spiritual relationships with the forest form an unbroken thread connecting the 21st century to the pre-Columbian world. They remind us that the Amazon's story is not one of a dead civilization discovered by outsiders, but of a living, evolving cultural tapestry where the past is not buried but remembered, cultivated, and carried forward. This perspective shifts the entire narrative from one of rediscovery to one of recognition, acknowledging that the deepest secrets of the jungle have always been kept by those who never left it. This living memory now faces a race against an unthinking force. The same process that first unveiled the geoglyphs from the air, the clearing of land, has become the greatest danger to this entire legacy. We are in a heartbreaking paradox where discovery and destruction are happening in the same breath. As the agricultural frontier pushes deeper into the rainforest for cattle ranching, soy cultivation, logging, and mining, ancient sites are being leveled before archaeologists can even set foot on them. Lidar technology now performs a dual and tragic role. It reveals the breathtaking outlines of a lost city in one season, and by the next, satellite images show the same coordinates scarred by roads and clearings. This creates an urgent and profound dilemma. How does a society balance immediate economic needs against the preservation of a heritage that belongs to all humanity? The loss is happening at a pace that defies careful study. Fires set to clear land can consume not just trees, but centuries of accumulated history in the soil, turning delicate pottery shards and post-hole patterns to ash. It is a race against time where the finish line is total erasure. Teams of archaeologists, often partnering with non-governmental organizations and indigenous communities, are engaged in a frantic salvage operation. They use real-time satellite monitoring to track deforestation hotspots, then rush to conduct emergency surveys, trying to document as much as they can before the bulldozers arrive. It is archaeology in crisis mode, where the goal is not leisurely excavation, but rapid digital preservation, capturing a site's essence before it vanishes forever. But this is about far more than saving old things. When a hectare of this forest is lost, we are not just losing trees, we are burning a library. Each site holds unique data on how human societies can thrive in the tropics without destroying their environment. The sophisticated agroforestry, the soil engineering of Terra Preta, the water management systems, these are not just historical curiosities. They are a repository of proven, sustainable knowledge that could offer vital insights for our own future in an era of climate change. The tragedy is that we are destroying the answers just as we are learning the right questions to ask. Protecting these sites is therefore an act of looking both backward and forward. It is about honoring the immense human achievement of the past, and it is about preserving a potential guidebook for resilience. Every earthwork plowed under, every mound flattened for pasture, represents a closed door, a conversation with our ancestors abruptly ended. The race is on, and the clock is measured in the relentless fall of trees. The story of this lost world is not held by a single field of study, but scattered across many. To truly piece it together, we need a new kind of vision, one that can connect the dots between what lies in the ground, what grows in the forest, and what is written in the very air. This is the power of interdisciplinary research, where archaeology does not stand alone, but listens to the whispers of ecology, soil science, and climate history. Each discipline holds a fragment of the truth, and only by fitting them together can we see the complete, breathtaking mosaic. Paleoecologists, for example, drill deep into the mud at the bottom of ancient Amazonian lakes. They are not looking for artifacts, but for something equally telling: microscopic grains of pollen and flecks of ancient charcoal preserved in the layers of sediment. By analyzing this preserved dust, they can reconstruct the forest of 1,000 years ago. They can see when certain trees, like those favored by human management, became more abundant. They can detect the signature of human-set fires, used to clear undergrowth or enrich soils, distinguishing them from large, catastrophic wildfires. This creates a timeline of human interaction with the landscape that is completely independent of pottery or tools. Meanwhile, soil scientists take the rich Terra Preta and subject it to forensic analysis. They break down its chemical and physical structure to understand not just what it is, but how it was made. They study the microscopic particles of charcoal, called biochar, to learn about the temperatures of ancient fires. They identify the types of organic matter and pottery fragments to reverse engineer the recipe. This tells us about daily life, about waste management, and about a deliberate, generations-long project of soil creation. At the same time, climate historians look at broader patterns. They examine stalagmites from caves, which grow in layers that record past rainfall, or they study ocean sediments that hint at shifts in atmospheric circulation. Their work asks a big question: how did the climate itself change during the centuries these civilizations thrived? The synthesis of all these threads reveals a story of remarkable adaptation. For instance, some of the most intensive periods of geoglyph construction and raised field farming appear to have occurred during slightly drier climatic phases. This is not a coincidence. In a time when rainfall was less reliable, the need for sophisticated water management, for canals to irrigate fields, and for raised mounds to stay above fluctuating water tables would have been absolutely critical. What looks from one angle like a monumental ceremonial project, from another angle becomes a vital survival strategy. The earthworks were not just spiritual centers, they were part of an integrated system of resilience. This interdisciplinary lens allows us to move beyond simplistic stories of a golden age followed by a sudden collapse. Instead, we see a long-term dance, a dynamic relationship between people and place that lasted for well over 1,000 years. Societies expanded, contracted, and transformed in response to both social innovation and environmental shifts. They were not static, they were agile, constantly learning and renegotiating their pact with the forest. This holistic view gives us something far more valuable than a tale of a lost city. It gives us a profound case study in long-term sustainability, written in the language of pollen, soil, and stone. Their story is not an isolated one, but a brilliant chapter in a much larger human chronicle. To truly grasp what they accomplished, we need to step back and see them standing alongside their famous contemporaries. While the Inca were carving stone fortresses into Andean peaks, and the Maya were calculating celestial cycles from limestone observatories, the master builders of the Amazon were pursuing a different kind of greatness. They were not constructing monuments to reach for the heavens, but engineering an entire ecosystem to sustain life on Earth. This is not a comparison of better or worse, but of profoundly different answers to the same fundamental question: how do we build a society that endures? The traditional historical narrative, often shaped by what leaves the most visible ruins, has long placed stone-based empires at the pinnacle of civilization. Pyramids and palaces, after all, are undeniable, but this view creates a silent hierarchy, one that has inadvertently rendered the Amazonian achievements invisible. Their cities were built of wood, earth, and living trees, materials that gracefully return to the cycle of life, leaving a subtler signature. To mistake this subtlety for simplicity is a profound error. What they lacked in quarried stone, they more than made up for in terraformed landscapes. While a Maya city might awe you with a single towering pyramid, an Amazonian garden city would envelop you in a functioning, productive paradise. Its monument was not a single structure, but the entire managed forest, the miles of causeways, and the deep, fertile soil that fed thousands. Their form of low-density urbanism, with communities spread across a cultivated landscape, was a masterful adaptation to the tropics. It avoided the sanitation and resource pressures of dense, stone-packed capitals, instead weaving the city into the fabric of the forest itself. This model represents a distinct and incredibly successful branch on the tree of human civilization. It proves that urban living is not a one-size-fits-all blueprint. The Amazonian solution demonstrates that a civilization's sophistication can be measured not just by the height of its towers, but by the intelligence of its integration with the natural world. For over 1,000 years, they sustained large populations in an environment we once thought impossible, not through conquest but through a deep, reciprocal partnership. Placing them in this global context does more than just add another pin to the map. It actively challenges our definitions of progress and success. It asks us to consider whether a society that leaves behind a richer, more biodiverse forest might hold as important a lesson as one that leaves behind a grand plaza. Their legacy, written in the language of ecology and earth, deserves its rightful place in our shared human story, not as a footnote, but but as a powerful testament to the diverse and ingenious ways humanity has learned to call this planet home. This concept of low-density urbanism completely rewrites our idea of what a city can be. The images from the Lidar scans are not showing us a single, centralized capital in the classical sense. There is no central acropolis or dense grid of streets packed with stone tenements. Instead, the pattern is one of deliberate, beautiful dispersion. Picture a vast green tapestry woven together by long, straight causeways. Along these roads, you would find clusters of homes, perhaps a few dozen families living together in a neighborhood nestled among fruit trees and garden plots. A few miles down the causeway, another cluster appears, and then another, each with its own small plaza or ceremonial space. Connecting them all are the monumental core sites, the places with the large platform mounds and geometric enclosures, which served as the spiritual and administrative hearts for the entire region. This entire network, spread across hundreds of square miles, functioned as one cohesive urban entity, a green metropolis. It is a revolutionary model of urban living, one that turns our traditional view of a city inside out. We are used to cities that are defined by their density, by how many people and buildings you can pack into a square mile. Think of ancient Rome, a warren of insulae apartments, or a medieval European town with its cramped streets within protective walls. That model concentrates resources and people, but it also creates intense pressure on local environments, requires complex infrastructure for water and waste, and can become vulnerable if those systems fail. The Amazonian model flips this script. Its strength came from its integration with the landscape, not its separation from it. By spreading out across a managed forest, the population distributed its footprint. Waste could be composted into the nearby Terra Preta gardens. Water was managed through a network of canals and ponds rather than massive aqueducts. Food came from the surrounding orchards and fish farms, reducing the need for long-distance transport of staples. This was a system built for resilience and sustainability. It is a pattern seen in other tropical civilizations, most famously at Angkor Wat in Cambodia. There, a vast low-density urban sprawl of reservoirs, rice paddies, and temple complexes was connected by canals and roads, all supporting a huge population without a single, dense downtown. This framework is not a sign of a lesser civilization, but of a brilliantly adapted one. It shows a philosophy of space that saw the city and the garden not as opposites, but as one and the same. The community was not walled off from its source of life, it was embedded within it. Understanding this is the key to reading the archaeological map correctly. We are not searching for a lost Rome in the jungle. We are learning to see the jungle itself as the metropolis, a living, breathing city whose streets were rivers and causeways, whose buildings were fruitful trees and raised earth platforms, and whose monument was a thriving, interconnected world. This discovery does more than add a new city to the history books. It adds a whole new definition of what a city can be. A single potsherd, no larger than your palm, can whisper 1,000 stories. While the grand earthworks reveal the scale of these societies, it is the humble fragments of daily life that let us hear their voices. Scattered across ancient hearths and middens, broken pottery is the most common artifact found, and each piece is a data point in a vast cultural record. Archaeologists carefully sort these fragments, noting their form, thickness, and most tellingly, their decoration. The variety is striking. There are thick, plain cooking pots, their surfaces blackened by countless fires, designed for practicality and durability. Alongside them are delicate, finely polished bowls and tall, elegant urns adorned with intricate geometric patterns, stylized animals, or human faces. This is not random variation. It is clear evidence of specialization. Just as in our own societies, there were artisans who dedicated themselves to their craft, developing distinct regional styles and techniques passed down through generations. The presence of this fine, decorated ware alongside simple utilitarian pottery suggests social differentiation. A world where certain objects were made for special occasions, for elite use, or for important rituals, marking distinctions in status and ceremony within the community. The tools they left behind speak to both ingenuity and connection. In a landscape largely devoid of workable stone, they became masters of alternative materials. Archaeologists find meticulously crafted fishhooks and needles carved from animal bone, sharp cutting tools made from the shells of giant river snails, and polished axes fashioned from hard, resistant stone that had to be traded from distant sources, sometimes hundreds of miles away. Perhaps most ingenious are the tools made from fired clay, not for cutting but for processing. Large, heavy clay slabs with grooved surfaces have been identified as manioc graters, used to turn the toxic root into edible flour, a process central to their survival. Each material tells a story of environmental adaptation and economic network. A bone needle hints at tailored clothing or net making. A shell knife speaks to riverine resources. An exotic stone axe head is a physical token of a trade route, proof that these garden cities were not isolated, but plugged into a continent-wide exchange of goods and ideas. Perhaps the most intimate connection comes from what these objects held. Using advanced chemical analysis, scientists can now detect microscopic residues trapped in the porous clay of ancient pots. These molecular ghosts reveal ancient recipes. A pot might show traces of maize and fish, evidence of a hearty stew. Another might hold the chemical signature of fermented manioc, pointing to the production of ceremonial drinks. Yet another could reveal a mix of fruits and honey. This is not just a list of ingredients, it is a window into daily meals, communal feasts, and sacred offerings. We can begin to understand their culinary palate, their nutritional strategies, and the social rituals that centered around shared food and drink. By mapping where distinct styles of pottery are found, archaeologists can draw cultural maps. A particular type of decorated bowl might be common in one river valley but absent in the next, suggesting a cultural boundary or a distinct ethnic group. Conversely, finding shards of a foreign style far from its origin point charts the flow of trade or the movement of people. These broken pieces become proxies for social geography. They show us zones of shared identity and the arteries of interaction that connected different polities across the vast Amazonian canvas. Together, these small, silent artifacts build a mosaic far richer than any single monument could provide. They tell us of the cook tending the family fire, the artisan painting a vessel with a careful hand, the trader negotiating for a rare piece of stone, the family sharing a meal. This is history written not from the top down, but from the ground up in the clay, bone, and shell of everyday existence, reminding us that the true pulse of a lost civilization beats in its most ordinary objects. The rivers were the true architects of this world. To see the Amazon as a dense, impenetrable jungle is to miss its fundamental geography, for it is first and foremost a universe of flowing water. The main artery of the Amazon River and its countless tributaries formed the central nervous system of these civilizations, a dynamic network of highways that made the vast basin not a collection of isolated pockets, but a single, interactive realm. Where we might see a barrier of water, they saw a conduit for connection. These waterways were the ancient equivalent of interstate highways and fiber optic cables combined, enabling the movement of people, the exchange of exotic goods like feathers and stone, and the flow of ideas and cultural practices across distances that would have been unimaginable on foot through the dense understory. This fluvial logic dictated where life concentrated. If you want to find the heart of this lost world, look to the bends and confluences of the rivers. Archaeologists consistently find the largest and most complex settlements positioned on high bluffs overlooking major waterways, at the strategic meeting points of two rivers, or on those seasonally flooded islands that were artificially raised into permanent strongholds. These were not random choices. A bluff provided a defensive vantage point, a confluence controlled trade, and a river island placed a community at the very center of the aquatic thoroughfare. From these hubs, canoe traffic could travel for hundreds, even thousands of miles. A trader from a settlement on the upper Madeira River could, in theory, paddle all the way to the Atlantic coast, passing through a chain of interconnected communities along the way. This constant watery traffic meant that news, technological innovations, and artistic styles could circulate with a speed and reach that reshapes our understanding of prehistoric isolation. The riverine environment was a generous larder, providing a steady, renewable source of protein that underpinned societal growth. The waters teemed with fish, from massive paruku to countless smaller species, and the banks were home to turtles and caimans. This aquatic bounty required sophisticated technology to harvest, leading to the invention of intricate nets, woven traps, and carefully placed weirs that funneled fish during seasonal migrations. But the gift of the rivers extended beyond the water's edge. Every year, the floodwaters would recede, leaving behind the varzea, the incredibly fertile floodplains. These were the breadbaskets of the ancient Amazon. The annual silt deposits renewed the soil, creating perfect conditions for agriculture. Here, communities could cultivate maize, squash, and other crops with remarkable productivity, complementing the perennial bounty of their managed upland forests. This combination of river protein and floodplain fertility created an economic engine of tremendous power, capable of supporting the dense populations that the archaeology now suggests. This constant interaction with flowing water did more than feed bodies, it shaped minds. A riverine worldview is inherently dynamic, cyclical, and interconnected. It teaches that pathways are not fixed but change with the seasons, that resources arrive and depart on a schedule written by the rains, and that your community is linked by a liquid thread to distant places you may never visit but from which visitors will come. This perspective likely infused their social structure and cosmology. Leadership may have been tied to control of prime riverfront locations or knowledge of trade networks. Myths and origin stories probably spoke of ancestral journeys down river or of gods emerging from the water. To understand these people, you cannot think like a forest dweller alone. You must think like a river traveler. See the landscape as they saw it, a web of liquid pathways where every bend held potential, every confluence was a crossroads, and the current itself was a force of both connection and life. The river was not just a feature of their world, it was the organizing principle that bound a disparate and wide-ranging cultural sphere into a coherent, communicative whole, making the Amazon basin one of the world's first and greatest networked civilizations. Yet even with these astonishing discoveries, we are still only reading the first few pages of a story that spans millions of square miles. For all the Lidar flights and riverbank excavations, the overwhelming majority of the Amazon remains a blank spot on our archaeological map. The true frontiers of this lost world are not the places we have looked, but the vast, silent territories we have not. The most tantalizing unknowns lie in the remote interfluvial zones, the immense stretches of dense forest between the great rivers. For generations, these areas were dismissed as uninhabitable backwaters, too far from the protein-rich rivers and fertile floodplains to support anything but the smallest, most transient groups. It was a logical assumption, but one that the history of this region has taught us to question at every turn. If societies could thrive in seasonally flooded savannas and on nutrient-poor uplands, who is to say they did not also master these deep forest interiors? The next great discovery may not be on a river bluff, but in the heart of the green, a garden city built around a hidden spring or a network of earthworks following an ancient, forgotten watershed. To find it, we will need more than machetes and determination. We will need a new generation of eyes. The tools of discovery are evolving faster than the forest can grow over them. The future of this search lies in a suite of emerging technologies that promise to make the invisible visible on an unprecedented scale. Lidar, while revolutionary, is still expensive and logistically challenging. The next wave will see this technology become more affordable and widespread, deployed on swarms of long-duration drones that can map vast, roadless areas. Researchers are even looking to the sky, developing satellite-based LiDAR systems that could, one day, scan the entire basin from orbit, offering a truly planetary perspective on this ancient human landscape. But LiDAR only sees the surface shape. To peer beneath it, scientists are turning to advanced ground-penetrating radar. This technology can create subterranean maps, revealing the layout of buried house foundations, storage pits, and hearths without ever breaking the soil, allowing us to virtually excavate a site before a single shovel touches the ground. The clues are not just in the shape of the land, but in the very molecules left behind. One of the most promising frontiers is biomolecular archaeology. Scientists are now able to extract ancient DNA not from human remains, which are exceptionally rare in the acidic Amazonian soil, but from the Terra Preta itself. This Terra Preta, this dark earth, is a biological archive. It contains microscopic fragments of genetic material from the plants that were grown there, and potentially from the people who cultivated them. By sequencing this ancient environmental DNA, researchers could reconstruct the precise botanical portfolio of a lost garden, identifying every fruit tree, medicinal herb, and staple crop. They might even trace the movement of people by comparing genetic signatures across different dark earth sites, mapping ancient migration routes and family connections across the centuries. The sheer volume of data from satellite imagery and LiDAR scans is becoming too much for any single team to process. This is where artificial intelligence enters the story. Machine learning algorithms can be trained to scan thousands of square miles of satellite photos, looking for subtle, human-made patterns that a human eye would miss, the faint geometric shadow of a buried earthwork or the spectral signature of ancient soil enrichment. These AI scouts could flag potential sites for human investigation, turning a needle in a haystack search into a targeted expedition. Each of these technological leaps, from orbital lasers to soil genomics, promises to expand the map of this lost civilization not incrementally but exponentially. The future of Amazonian archaeology, therefore, is not one of final answers but of continuous, breathtaking revelation. It is a future where every expedition into the uncharted green, armed with these new senses, could unveil another chapter of the story. A single flight over a previously unmapped interfluvial region might reveal a constellation of geometric earthworks rivaling those in Acre. A soil core from a remote patch of dark earth could rewrite the genetic history of the continent. What this means is humbling and exhilarating. All the monumental platforms, the vast garden cities, the intricate canal networks we have marveled at so far, they may not be the climax of the story. They might only be the preface, the opening lines of a much larger, still hidden epic of human achievement waiting in the shadows of the leaves. The greatest discovery may be the dawning realization of just how much we have yet to find. This collaborative spirit is not just an ethical choice, it is the key to unlocking a deeper truth. The process of uncovering this past must be conducted with profound sensitivity and genuine partnership, for these are not merely academic sites, they are the ancestral heritage of living indigenous peoples. The days of the outsider archaeologist arriving, excavating, and leaving with artifacts and data are fading. A new, more respectful model has taken root, one where leading researchers begin not with a shovel, but with a conversation. They seek permission, guidance, and partnership from the communities whose history is written in the very soil beneath their feet. This means incorporating traditional knowledge into research designs, respecting cultural protocols around sacred spaces, and ensuring that the work benefits the community, whether through education, employment, or the strengthening of land rights. It is a shift from extraction to collaboration. For instance, when mapping ancient settlements, an elder's story about a place in the forest being a home of the ancestors can guide researchers directly to a significant site, saving years of random survey. Conversely, archaeological evidence of ancient fish weirs can bolster a community's historical claim to their fishing grounds, providing tangible proof of their deep, enduring connection to the land. This partnership is a powerful defense against the twin threats of looting and unchecked development. When local communities are invested as stewards and co-investigators, they become the most effective guardians of these fragile sites, protecting them not as relics of a dead past, but as vital chapters of their own living story. The result is a far richer, more accurate, and culturally nuanced interpretation. An artifact is no longer just a tool. It becomes an object with a name, a use, and a story passed down through generations. A geometric earthwork is not just an enigmatic shape. It is understood within a cosmology that gives it meaning. This ethical approach fundamentally transforms the narrative. The story of the lost Amazonian civilization ceases to be a closed book, decoded solely by outsiders with advanced technology. Instead, it becomes a living history, co-authored. The descendants of its builders are not subjects of study, they are essential narrators. Their oral traditions, their ecological wisdom, their spiritual connections to the landscape provide the context that turns data into understanding. This ensures the final narrative is not one of conquest and discovery, but of respect and mutual revelation. It acknowledges that the deepest secrets of the jungle are not just hidden in the ground, but carried in the memory of its people, waiting to be shared in a spirit of shared curiosity and profound respect. The allure of a hidden city often comes wrapped in layers of thrilling fiction. We see it in adventure films where intrepid explorers battle supernatural guardians, or in sensational theories that credit lost civilizations with impossible, otherworldly technologies. These stories are exciting, but they create a fog of myth that obscures the genuine and far more remarkable truth emerging from the Amazonian soil. The reality requires no embellishment. This was not a land of crystal skulls or cities paved with gold, but of communities that mastered the art of living within a vibrant, demanding world. Their genius was not in defying nature with magic or machines, but in listening to it, learning its rhythms, and collaborating with it on a grand scale. The treasure they left behind is not a chest of jewels, but a blueprint for sustainability. It is the knowledge of how to feed millions from enriched soil, how to design cities that are also gardens, and how to build a society that can flourish for 1,000 years without consuming its own foundation. When we project our own fantasies of advanced technology or cursed riches onto them, we inadvertently diminish their actual accomplishment. We replace the profound human story of collective effort and ecological wisdom with a shallow spectacle. The real inspiration lies in understanding that these extraordinary landscapes were built by ordinary people, not gods or aliens. It was the accumulated knowledge of countless generations, passed down and refined, that allowed them to sculpt earthworks, engineer soils, and cultivate forests. This demystification is not about making the story less interesting. It is about making it truly meaningful. By setting aside the pop culture myths, we can finally see their legacy for what it is, a powerful testament to human resilience and our capacity for symbiosis with the planet. That narrative, written in dark earth and geometric patterns, offers a lesson more valuable than any fictional treasure, a guide for our own future written in the language of the past. Their legacy is not locked in the past but speaks directly to our most urgent present. In an age of climate crisis and vanishing forests, the choices of these ancient societies offer a startlingly relevant blueprint. Their most profound innovation, the Terra Preta soils, is now at the forefront of modern agricultural research. Scientists recognize this dark earth not just as fertile ground, but as a powerful technology for carbon sequestration. The charcoal, or biochar, embedded in the soil acts like a geological safe, locking away carbon for centuries or even millennia. Today, farmers and researchers are actively trying to replicate this ancient recipe, creating modern biochar to enrich depleted soils and pull carbon dioxide from the atmosphere simultaneously. It is a direct bridge between pre-Columbian wisdom and 21st century climate solutions, proving that some of the most advanced tools for our future might be found in the archives of the past. Their mastery of agroforestry provides another critical lesson. In a world where industrial agriculture often means clearing vast tracts of land for single crops, the Amazonian model presents a compelling alternative. Their food forests were the opposite of monoculture. By cultivating a diverse tapestry of fruit trees, palms, vines, and root crops together, they created a system that was inherently resilient. Pests or disease might affect one species, but the overall garden thrived. This approach maintained the forest canopy, protected the soil, and preserved biodiversity, all while producing a continuous harvest. Modern agroforestry projects from Brazil to Southeast Asia are now embracing this ancient logic, showing that we can feed people without sacrificing the ecological integrity of the land. It is a testament to the idea that abundance does not require simplification. Even their urban planning holds wisdom for our crowded planet. The low-density, garden-city model they perfected stands in stark contrast to the resource-intensive megacities of today. Their settlements were integrated with the environment, not imposed upon it. Water was managed through local canals and ponds, waste was composted into soil, and food came from the immediate landscape. This dramatically reduced their ecological footprint, creating a circular system where outputs became inputs. For modern architects and planners looking to design greener, more livable cities, especially in tropical regions, this ancient template offers a vision of urban life that is distributed, green, and fundamentally sustainable. It challenges the assumption that progress must always mean denser concrete and longer supply chains. Perhaps the most sobering lesson comes from the end of their story. These were not fragile societies on the brink of collapse. They were robust, adaptable civilizations that had flourished for well over 1,000 years, precisely because they had learned to work within their environmental limits. Their downfall was not caused by a failure of their own systems, but by a catastrophic external shock they could never have anticipated. The arrival of old-world diseases serves as a haunting reminder that even the most resilient and well-adapted cultures can be vulnerable to sudden, overwhelming change. In our era of global interconnection and climate disruption, this historical echo is impossible to ignore. It underscores that sustainability is not just about balance with nature, but also about building social and immunological resilience in an unpredictable world. This is why their history transcends mere archaeological curiosity. It moves from being a story about what was lost to a conversation about what can be found again, not in the form of golden idols, but in principles for living. Their practices were not about retreating from nature, but about engaging with it at the deepest level of understanding. They show us that human ingenuity, when directed toward partnership rather than domination, can create systems of extraordinary longevity and abundance. As we face the immense environmental challenges of our own century, looking back at these master gardeners and earth shapers is not an exercise in nostalgia. It is an act of hope, a search for a toolkit written in dark earth and living forest, waiting to be read by a world that desperately needs to remember how to listen. The scale of this revelation reaches far beyond the borders of the rainforest. The confirmation of these complex societies fundamentally rewrites the story of the Americas before European contact. For generations, the historical narrative focused on a handful of celebrated civilizations: the stone cities of the Maya, the mountain empire of the Inca, the floating gardens of the Aztec. The Amazon was relegated to the periphery, a vast green emptiness on the map of human achievement. This was the last stronghold of a flawed idea called environmental determinism, the belief that certain landscapes, like dense tropical forests, were simply incapable of nurturing large-scale, sophisticated societies. That idea is now obsolete. The evidence from the ground proves the Amazon was not a blank space but a pulsing heartland. This changes our understanding of the entire hemisphere at the moment of contact. It suggests the Americas were far more densely populated and intricately developed than our textbooks ever allowed. We must now picture a connected tapestry of millions of people, from the Great Lakes to the Andes, from the Mississippi to the Amazon, a hemisphere alive with diverse and brilliant cultures. This expanded scale makes the tragedy that followed even more profound. The demographic collapse triggered by introduced diseases was not a series of isolated tragedies, but a cataclysm of continental proportions, a loss of knowledge, culture, and human potential so vast it literally allowed a forest to grow over the memory of entire civilizations. Recognizing this depth of loss is essential to understanding the true shape of history. This discovery also adds a crucial, missing chapter to the global story of human innovation. For too long, the definition of a city was drawn from models built in stone. The Amazonian garden cities present a radically different, yet equally sophisticated, blueprint for urban life. Their mastery of agroforestry and soil engineering represents a pinnacle of sustainable agricultural science, developed independently and sustained for over a millennium. This places the indigenous peoples of the Amazon rightfully alongside their more famous contemporaries, not as primitive forest dwellers, but as master builders and visionary ecologists. Their monument was a living, breathing world. Ultimately, this is about restoring agency and grandeur. It moves these cultures from the footnotes of history to its central chapters. It enriches our collective human story with a powerful lesson that civilization is not a single path, but a spectrum of brilliant adaptations. Greatness can be expressed in the quiet cultivation of a food forest as meaningfully as in the carving of a pyramid. The most profound histories are not always written in stone. Sometimes they are written in the soil, waiting for us to learn how to read them. The journey through this lost world reveals a civilization not of stone and gold, but of earth, trees, and flowing water. It was a society that mastered its environment with a sophistication we are only beginning to grasp. From the silent geometry of the earthworks to the life-giving richness of the dark soils, from the ghostly city maps revealed by lasers to the living memory held by indigenous communities, every piece of evidence converges on a single, breathtaking truth. The ancient Amazon was not a pristine wilderness, but a carefully tended garden, home to vast, interconnected societies that flourished for over 1,000 years. This story does more than fill a blank space on a historical map. It challenges the very foundations of how we define civilization and progress. It asks us to reconsider where we look for greatness, shifting our gaze from towering pyramids to the intelligent patterns of a managed forest, from grand plazas to the enduring fertility of human-made soil. The lessons here are profound and urgent. In their ingenious adaptation, we see a powerful model of sustainability, a demonstration that human societies can thrive in partnership with nature rather than in conquest of it. In their sudden collapse, we hear a sobering echo about the fragility of even the most resilient cultures when faced with unforeseen catastrophe. Today, we stand at a unique crossroads of discovery and loss. The same technologies that are revealing this hidden history also show us the relentless advance of its destruction. Each new Lidar scan is a race against the bulldozer, each excavated potsherd a fragment saved from the fire. Protecting what remains of this legacy is no longer just an archaeological concern. It is a vital act of preserving a library of human knowledge. The wisdom encoded in these garden cities, in their agroforestry and soil science, may hold keys to addressing the environmental challenges of our own century. This lost civilization, once hidden beneath miles of dense jungle, now emerges as one of the most important historical detective stories of our time. It is a testament to human ingenuity and a call to curiosity, respect, and preservation. The story is not finished. Every flight over the uncharted green could reveal another chapter. If this exploration into the deep past resonated with you, consider subscribing to join us as we uncover more mysteries that reshape our understanding of history. We would love to hear your thoughts on these incredible discoveries in the comments below. What aspect of this lost Amazonian world do you find most compelling? Thank you for watching.